Okay, let's dive in. We've got this really interesting set of sources, and one term keeps popping up everywhere: neural anarchy. It's in neuroscience, politics, AI, even culture.
Yeah, it really does. And what's striking is how this single idea, it's polysemous, right? Multiple related meanings seems to nail this core tension we see a lot today.
What tension is that?
Well, it's that push and pull between, decentralized complexity bubbling up and the need for some kind of structure, some control.
Ah, okay. So it sort of pushes back against the old idea of one central boss running everything, whether that's the self or society or whatever system.
Precisely. That's the core challenge it presents.
Got it. So the mission for this deep dive, then, is to unpack neural anarchy across these different fields using your sources and see what it tells us about how we're thinking about order and chaos now.
Sounds good. Let's start with the brain itself, where the name comes from. Billions of neurons. The sources talk about the brain having this inherent sort of anarchy.
But not just pure chaos, right? The sources are clear on that.
No, exactly. There have to be constraints. Unchecked chaos, that's pathological. You see it in things like severe trauma responses or certain attachment difficulties where there's just no regulation.
Right. Chaos for chaos' sake isn't helpful.
Mm.
But then there's this idea of useful anarchy.
Yes. And this is where brain entropy comes in. It sounds counterintuitive because entropy usually means disorder.
Yeah.
But here, the sources use it to mean the complexity and variability of brain signals. And the key finding is that higher entropy, up to a point, is actually linked to better cognitive function.
Like intelligence, creativity.
Exactly those things, especially in brain areas like the prefrontal cortex, the ones doing the heavy lifting for complex thought. It's like the brain has a richer, more flexible toolkit.
But there's limit.
Definitely. Too much entropy, like sometimes seen in conditions like schizophrenia, signifies dysregulation, not better function. It has to be integrated complexity.
Which brings us to what happens when integration fails, that anarchic hand syndrome example you found. That's pretty vivid.
It really is. A person's limb just acts on its own. Complex actions, but totally outside their conscious will. The sources link it to broken connections, white matter disconnections.
A literal fragmentation of will.
Yeah. It really shows what that uncontrolled, disintegrated anarchy looks like in a stark way.
It makes you question that whole single CEO in the head model, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This view suggests the self is more emergent, arising from all these decentralized networks talking to each other.
Okay, so shifting from the brain's biology to the socio-political angle, the sources talk about neuroanarchy in the neurodiversity movement.
Right, and here it's not about chaos, but a conscious choice. It's about stepping away from or challenging what they call neuronormative standards.
This is a sort of default expectation of how brains should work.
Exactly. Challenging the neuroarchy, the system that privileges that neurotypical way of being. Often, the sources say it comes from feeling like an outsider.
And they have these concepts like the chaotic self.
Viewing the self as fluid, always changing. Embracing transformation, like neuroqueering.
Neuroqueering, so that's the practice of actively subverting those norms.
Yes, actively pushing against expectations. It's about embracing that identity, not trying to fix it.
And what about the autistic rhizome? That sounds intriguing.
It's a model for community. Think less like a tree with a main trunk, more like, well, like a rhizome, roots spreading underground. Decentralized, interconnected, no single hierarchy.
So a way to build community, maybe online, that avoids traditional top-down structures, tackling that problem of scale for decentralized groups.
Potentially, yes, connecting peer-to-peer. The sources also mention things like autistic shielding.
Which isn't hiding, but projecting traits proudly, sometimes described as aggressively autistic.
Right, reclaiming space. But, the sources are fair. They also point out the challenges. Applying this to huge societies is tricky, and there can be issues of exclusion within movements, too.
Sure, practicalities. Okay, so let's pivot to tech and culture. How does anarchy play out there?
Well, you see echoes in ideas like technological anarchism, Shapiro's idea, using AI, blockchain, for a post-scarcity society run by moral algorithms.
As utopian.
It does. And the sources note the critiques, tech utopianism, baked-in biases in the algorithms, that sort of thing.
It highlights that tension with AI, right?
Yeah.
Could it free us up, decentralize things, or become this massive control tool.
Absolutely. And look how the language gets used. You found that Anarchy AI example.
Yeah, anarchist branding, but it's a venture-backed company building an AGI server.
Right. It shows how that decentralization language can be co-opted. Some sources argue these huge foundation models in AI are actually anti-anarchist. They impose standards, centralize power.
So this spills into sci-fi too, doesn't it? Exploring these ideas.
Definitely. Think about group minds. Vinge's Time's truly decentralized emergent intelligence. Contrast that with Clarke's Overmind.
Childhood's end, where individuality gets absorbed into this bigger central consciousness.
Exactly. Exploring that whole spectrum, utopia to dystopia.
And cyberpunk.
Boy.
The whole aesthetic feels relevant here.
Oh, completely. The sources frame it as almost the visual language of neural anarchy. Body mods, implants, blurring human-machine lines.
That fragmented, tech-merged self trying to navigate a chaotic world.
You got it. Grappling with control, identity.
So if we try to tie this all together, the sources seem to suggest this kind of triple helix. The biology of the brain informs the politics of the self, which shapes the technology and the cultural imagination.
That's a great way to put it. The biological grounds, the political, which influences the technological and cultural.
And it matters for things like mental health. Maybe seeing it less as just disorder, more about integration versus chaos.
Yeah, or disability rights challenging neuronormativity. And definitely AI ethics, taking a harder look at what decentralization actually means in practice.
Okay, so thinking about all this, how our brains are maybe decentralized networks, how ideas of the self are becoming more fluid, and how technology is blurring lines, here's something to chew on. What does control even mean anymore in that context?